Hey everybody, it's Honesty, and we are reviewing or rereading and discussing the Connecticut Kings. So we weren't able to get all the way through the previous books in the series before the new one came out. So we are cutting our programming, right? We're breaking into your regularly scheduled programming, and this week we're going to talk about Love's Encroachment by Love Belvin. So, Attorney General, how you doing this week?
I am glorious, darling. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to hear that you're glorious. I'm actually um, I'm right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm very full because I got down here, and as soon as I got into my aunt's house, she gave me a glass of liquor. She made me pork chops and fried chicken and corn and sweet potatoes and salad, and I'm stuffed, I'm happy, and I'm ready to talk about the book.
Why are you bragging? Why would you get on Blue Ivy's internet Wi-Fi and brag about this delicious meal that you just enjoyed with some, was it brown juice? Was the liquor brown
Yes,
juice? I mean,
yes,
how
yes, yes,
dare you?
yes.
How dare you? How dare you? What a
Because if I'm
tease.
happy, you're happy.
Well, I was glorious until I heard all of that. I'm happy because it's a short week. Tomorrow's my last day. I took Thursday and Friday off, child. I'm like, yes, yes,
Oh, good.
yes,
So that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
yes.
Okay. Um, I am not prepared to talk about love's encroachment. What I mean by this is, I have read the book, but we usually do love and like and surprise and who needs to be
Yeah,
sad.
yeah.
Um, I can't do that this week.
You just all over?
I I feel a lot of things. I feel
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of things.
yeah.
I feel angry. I feel confused. I feel uh, I have like 8 or 9 people that should be stabbed. I just I don't know what to do. I don't even have an overview. Let me see if I can come up with that real quick. So Nadira had a very abusive and challenging upbringing, and gosh, Lons came into her life and brought a ray of sunshine. When life got in the way, she was quickly moved away from that sunshine and experienced 21, 22 years of rain. She was moved away from him because she got pregnant and she allowed the father who was abusive to her to have an instrumental role in her son's life. Now that her son is close to adulthood, if not into adulthood, and in college himself and ready to make moves and transitions, she feels it is time for him to meet his father. His father is Alonzo. No, babe, the son is Zoe. The father is Alonzo, but they call him Lon. He is the new coach of the Connecticut Kings, and he's got an uphill battle earning the team's trust. And it's ironic that he's supposed to earn trust because that's the one thing that he has the hardest time doing. So I
Mm.
guess the question that you would ask if this was going to be a book blurb, right? Because all the book blurbs have to end with the question, will they get together? I guess the question that you would ask at the end of this is, what the fuck is wrong with them? That's the question. That's the question. It's not will they, won't they? It's not will love persevere? It's not does love stand the test of time if I've been gone for 22 years? The question at the end of the blurb is what the fuck is wrong with these people? I'm just gonna turn it over to you because good night. Like what go ahead. You have to tell me. Go.
So I did organize my thoughts because I was similarly all over the place. Um, and concluded that my feelings about characters aside, this does speak to Love Belvin's talent because these characters, and I think her characters tend to really get under your skin. And when a book gets under your skin where you are devoting hours of mental and emotional energy to these fictional characters, that says something about the talent of that author in crafting a story that stayed with you, right? So with that said, I neither like nor respected Nadira. And
Yeah.
um I was ambivalent. Like, I mean, when it kicks off with the abuse, I mean, how could you not be like, oh my goodness, this is awful? So there was
Mhm.
definitely
Mhm.
sympathy there. And then I became ambivalent. But once we were in the present day, that ambivalence very quickly morphed into dislike and, you know, a lack of respect. Because in the end, and it made me, and I had a couple of, I think, revelations from the book that I think apply to real life. Being afraid is being human. Being a coward is a choice.
Mm. Okay.
Because we are all, no one escapes this life, I don't think, without having moments where they are afraid, right? That's human to be afraid. But being a coward is choosing to let the fear override everything else,
Mhm.
right? And so giving a full pass for what happened when she was 17, because she was a child, right? So she was a child and she was an abused child, right? I mean, her father ruled that family literally with an iron fist. And so her disappearing, her having Zoe and not telling Lons, I give her a pass on that. She was a child. But
Mhm.
at a certain point, it then became a choice that to me was less about being afraid of her father, and it became more about her being a coward, which she does acknowledge and call herself, and also a level of selfishness because she says to Lons, I didn't want to find out that you had a wife and kids. I hired someone. I researched you periodically. And when I read that,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, so this, you're acknowledging that, yes, understanding the damage that your father did, but at a certain point, you continued down this path when you knew your father had outright lied about the legal issues, right? Because I was like, okay, love,
Right.
make
Because she
this
went to
right
law
because I'm a
school.
lawyer. You're not sitting here writing a lawyer
Right.
talking about she didn't know the statute of limitations. And so love made that right, as I should have known that she would. Um, but and when she admitted that to Lons, and I was like, okay, of course, by this point, by the time they're having this conversation, I was candidly like, sis, you a day late and a dollar short because you've been real passive about getting your
Mhm.
story out there, and you let off this nuclear bomb, right? You don't get to let off a nuclear bomb and everybody else is scurrying to throw on the hazmat suits to clean stuff up, and you're kind of like, oh, but I'm a coward and they don't really want me to help, so I'm just going to sit and wait until, because what that did was Zoe was then stepping in to be the adult that I felt his mother should have been.
Which was
And that
so
was another
odd to
reason why
me.
I didn't like or respect her, because it felt like Zoe, even though Nidira wasn't asking Zoe to step in, Zoe was acting as a protector of his mother, which I felt spoke to their dynamic, right? He didn't just start behaving that way at
Mhm.
21. I felt like that was probably a
Right.
characteristic of their relationship. And here he is. Yeah. And here he is at 21 processing the fact that his father had no idea he existed, you know, and his mother has come to New Jersey, but she doesn't have her housing situation figured out, even though she's a grown ass woman, 38,
And a
money.
constitutional law
Yeah, it was just too much of Zoe. I felt Zoe carrying the burden on top of the burden of his feelings about this nuclear bomb that his mother had dropped on him. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that really, but you know what? I don't know about you, but I know people in my own life who have required their children to be the adult because they're still walking around acting like kids. So I
I do too, and I don't
recognize
like those people. And
exactly,
that's why,
exactly.
like, I had such a
Yeah,
hard time connecting with the story. I could not connect. I couldn't find
yeah.
anybody in the story to hold on to at all.
And see, I love Lons. I love Lon. Well, let me say
He
this.
got on my
I
nerves
love
too.
Zoe. I thought Zoe was everything, right? I thought Zoe was the beam of light to me in this story.
Hmm.
And I
I
liked
can see that.
Lons. Let me not say I love. I liked Lons because I thought that Lons was, he obviously had his own baggage, but again, this bomb gets dropped and he doesn't know how to be a father, but he taps into some of the things that he does
What it
know,
was
right?
like
And
to be
and
a
so his
son. Yeah.
football, right? Yeah, his what
Hmm.
it's like, what he didn't like, what his father did to him, and then also
Hmm.
tapping into his role as a football coach and just trying
Yes.
to be there for Zoe however he could be while he continues to process his feelings about what happened. Um,
Hmm.
and so I liked and I sympathized with Lons. I absolutely loved Zoe. And I hated that Zoe was carrying um his mother's burden while she was kind of like, I'm a coward, but I'm gonna cook for you.
Hmm.
I'm a coward, but I'm gonna sleep in your
And then
bed.
the whole
I'm a
sleep in the
coward.
bed, and then the dildo and the boogers. I was like, what am I reading?
The booger habit, I was just kind of like, I'm just gonna block that out because
I'm
it
just gonna
was
move on past
so,
it.
yeah, I just couldn't even. I was like, ew, okay. But I felt like there were so many other things about her that I didn't
Hmm.
like that I was like, I don't even need to get into that disgusting habit. I don't like you as a person. And
Right.
she had moments, right? The moment at Trenton and Jade's, that was a moment, right? But
Hmm.
that didn't overcome all the other moments where I was just kind of like, sis, like, when are you gonna step up to the plate? Like, what are you
Right. And
doing?
you know what I think it was? I think because I haven't read Muted Love, but I've read everything else by Love Belvin. And I don't people love Asmere. I'm here or there on Asmere. Or
Yeah, yeah,
and the whole series. People love
yeah.
Stint and Zoe. I'm here or there on Stint and Zoe. I feel like she was too young for him. I feel like it was a little bit R. Kelly-ish for him to be interested in her. And I just never connected to them because she was so young. And then whiny, and I couldn't connect. And that's part of my like issue as a writer is that I typically write from inside of me. One thing I
Hmm.
can't say about Love Belvin, I've never met her, I don't know this woman, but I do not think she writes from inside of her. But like sometimes that's what slows me down because I
Okay.
cannot divorce myself from my characters and what their experiences are. And so I'd be like
Mm,
exhausting myself into these people's lives, it's like stories that I'm writing. And that's probably bad. And it's something that I'm working on getting better at. But that's part of why I pick stuff up and put it down and pick it up and put it down and get so tired is because I be writing from inside of me. Like back to us, some of that is me, or you know what I'm saying? Like some of this stuff, like I have either lived or seen or like worked with people who had similar issues. So Stint and Zoe, I couldn't get with them. I love Raji. His story is so tragic, but I think we
yeah,
talked about him either in podcast or right after we was recording, and I didn't put it in the show. But I love Winter's worldliness, and it's hard to be worldly and not lose your compassion, and she didn't.
yeah.
She
Hmm.
knew
Hmm.
all about the world, but she was still
Yeah,
so compassionate and matter of fact about a person
yeah,
that had been through something, but she chose not to throw him away. Love
yeah.
Raji and Winter. Love Ezra. Everybody know because my whole Instagram used to just be trolling people about Ezra because of the model guy that I kept saying was Ezra. Love Ezra for a variety of reasons. I told you before. I was a hospice chaplain. I was a perinatal loss
Hmm.
chaplain. I'm a licensed therapist. I grew up in the church to the tune of going to church 8 out of 7 nights a week. Like I preached, I married, I buried, went in the pulpit. Like I lived Ezra. Now I'm not a
Hmm.
BDSM person, but I understand Ezra. But Sadiq, Book one, yes. Book two and three, I was like, oh, okay. So I feel like my where I always, and I feel like I when I do put out the Christina C. Jones podcast that I did, she was very kind. She came on my podcast. I was talking about how I'd be arguing with Love Belvin in my head. And I think part of like when I read her books, and I think part of it is if because I write from inside, for better or for worse, probably for worse, I also read from inside.
Hmm.
And so if I can't find anybody to make me in the book, I be like, where we at?
Hmm.
Like I can't, I have a hard time making the connection. And that's what happened here. I felt if there was
Interesting.
anybody who I could connect with in this book, it was probably Lonza's parents. Because they just seemed the most normal.
I thought
But
Monica
like,
was pretty normal too. No,
yeah, she was.
his
You're right.
sister.
She was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, his sister. But like, I could not latch on to a single person, and I found myself looking at the two of them like, please leave each other alone.
See, I looked at it as Lons, please leave her alone. Right.
Okay, yeah, that too, that too, that too.
I understood why she was
She
gravitating
wanted him.
towards
Yeah,
him,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
and so your points are well taken in terms of how you write and how you read. I think I hover right from
Okay.
outside, and so
Mm-hmm.
but like I said, there are people in my life that reminded me, or that Nye reminded me of. And to
Mm.
your point, I don't like those people, and I don't like that about those people in my own life, and so the other thing that I recognized was, I'm sure you've done like personality assessments and whatnot. I've done them
Mm-hmm.
personally, professionally, and I'm a Capricorn, right? Accountability is a
Yeah.
very, very important value to me. And that seems to be both aligned with my sign, but also just my personality. Like accountability is critically important to me. And I understand you're scared. I understand you're hurt. I understand you've got baggage. But when there's a job to be done, do your effing job,
Yeah.
right? Do
Yeah.
what needs to be done. And I'm not talking about employment, right? I'm talking about when there's
Right.
a child in the situation, you've brought a child into the situation. I understand you got things going on. I have zero patience for people that leave a child, basically out in the wild because they're still caught
Mm-hmm.
up in their drama. That drives me up the
Mm-hmm.
wall because I'm like, that child had no choice about whether or not they were
Yeah.
going to be here. You brought them here, and now you've decided that you still want to focus on you. And this little human being that can't take care of themselves, they got to just figure it out, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
with it now, granted, when we meet Zoe, he is 21, right? But I was just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, he was not the adult in this situation, right? Between the three of them,
Right.
his parents were the adults. And he was behaving as
Right.
I thought Lons was also handling it like an adult. I understood him giving Nye the cold shoulder, but I
Yeah.
was like, why is he being forced to be more of an adult than his own mama who wants to keep talking about,
Right.
well, my son is my everything and I'm here for my son and I came all the way out here to New Jersey to make sure that my son was okay. Sis, like please. And I this was a situation where I think she truly believed that about herself, right? But the flip side was we don't get the confrontation where Zoe says to her, why would you do that to me? Why would
Yeah, they
you
never have the blow
deprive
up.
me of him? You know, they had that blow up months after she told him, right?
Right.
Remember when he says to Lons, he's like, I'm trying to figure out what to do with this huge ball of anger that has snowballed since I learned about you, and
Mm-hmm.
now realize that I can't direct it at you because you had no idea I existed, and I
Right.
can't direct it at
At
her
my mother,
because she's been my
exactly.
ride or die.
Yep.
you know I would have loved to have seen, I wish that love would have given us that scene, because I felt like I wanted to see her sit with that. She got Lonz's ire. Fine. I wanted to see her sit and hear from her son how he walked
Hmm.
around thinking for years that his father just didn't want him, right? Because he
Right.
says that to Lons, I think. He's like, oh, I walked around thinking you just didn't want me. You was just some ain't shit nigga. And I find
Hmm.
out you didn't even know I was alive, right? I
Right.
wanted to see that confrontation. I wish she had given us that because I was like, nah, I need to see you sit in that because hearing it from this adult man that you abandoned is one thing. Hearing it from your son who you claim you've been living for this past 21 years. Because where did he get that from? That's the other thing, right? Where did
Yeah.
he get this notion? That was something that also was never addressed. What did she actually tell Zoe about his father? And
Hmm.
maybe it came from her father, right? But he clearly had this impression that his father didn't want him,
Right.
right? And it wasn't his father was bad mouth. We just weren't told what he was told.
What he
But
was
whatever
told.
he was told from whoever said it, he had the impression that his father didn't want him. And I was like, this poor baby walked around with that baggage for all these years. And here you are sitting over here, flicking your boogers, talking about, I'm a coward. I know I'm a coward. I'm going to cook for you, even though you don't want to talk to me. I'm going to sleep in your
Hmm.
bed, even though you don't want to talk to me. I was like, I'm thinking to myself, girl, if you don't send him an email, use a carrier pigeon, write him a letter, like, you made this mess. Let's see a little bit more effort from you beyond right that first meeting at the lawyer's office because he didn't want to talk to you then. You're like, okay, well, he doesn't want to talk to me. So, and I'm a coward.
Yeah, and
So,
I think the reason that two things. I think the reason that some of well more than two, but these two reasons that she rubbed me the wrong way is number one. I kept thinking she was gonna say even after I was an adult because she doesn't call him until her father is on his deathbed,
right.
and so I kept thinking she was gonna say he was an enforcer. His whole job was to damn near murder people. And I just never wanted to reach out. I never knew having because when you're abused by somebody and like for real, like you never know how far their reach is because part of the abuse is the mind game of popping up when you least expect them, knowing
Yes.
things that they're not supposed to know,
Yes.
alluding to things, and you're trying to figure out did they say that because they know? Are they fishing? Like part of it is the mind game. So I kept expecting not mind game, but but abuse, like mental abuse.
Yeah.
What I kept expecting her to say was, even as a 28, 30, 35, and 40-year-old woman, I never knew what he was going to do. It was not until he was unto death that I felt like it was safe to call you. That I kept waiting on her to say that, but she went another way. Like this
Yeah.
woman saying like
Yeah.
statute of limitations and
Yeah.
whatever else came
It
up,
was
and
weak.
I'm like,
It was weak.
yeah, it was kind of like so you weren't afraid of him anymore, your
Right.
father. You
Right.
just didn't feel like it, or because it was like as you found out, well, no, it's not the statute of limit. That statute of limitations is not an issue, and then like all of these barriers that were up in your mind, like you said, at 17, that made perfect sense for a 17-year-old. By 35, 6, 7, 8, 43, where we
Yeah.
at? Where we at? Where we at?
Yeah.
And so I
And
think
that's why, I
I
felt
didn't
that
buy her reason. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I felt because because like I said, she slips in there. Well, I didn't want to disturb. She says, I think she phrases it as, I didn't want to disturb your life, something along those lines. And
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if maybe you had a wife and children. And that's when I was like, oh, so that's what this was about,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
That's what I,
It was all
kind of,
it just felt like scheming or scamming. And so
yes,
the
yes,
inverse of this is Jade prancing into Trent's room in a t-shirt with no underwear on and sitting at the edge of the bed and smelling all good. In her situation, it was kind of like I'm 25, he's 26, I'm getting comfortable here, and he is cute. It's nothing nobody can do about the fact that this man is fine. And I'm attracted to him, and I'm a kid and he a kid, and the big ogre, and trying to get to know this person who you can sense is a good person genuinely, but
yeah,
you're just interested and you're kind of in this house and he's the only other adult. She didn't have me, she was kind of doing nails back and forth, but like, and it was very much that you could see two people who were sexually attracted to each other coming to growing to get to know each other, but kind of using physicality or using sexuality as the entry
Yeah.
to a more meaningful relationship. In this instance, the sneaking in and all that other stuff was just kind of like, was this the plan all along?
Right.
Because, as you've been saying, we're not in our early or mid 20s, we're
Right.
in our 40s.
Right.
Like, when are we going to have a conversation? And I just couldn't figure out her motivation. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the
It was
son
just
to say, yeah, for the son to say, my mom is spending, two, three, four, $500 a day. I don't know what kind of hotel she was staying in to stay in this hotel, and her situation is not straight. She's lingering on the East Coast for me, but she won't really say that. You know what I'm saying? Can she stay with you? You got all this room. You welcoming me into your family. I know y'all got beef, but I can understand. To your point of him being the adult, he was basically saying, I need y'all to figure something out. I need you to ask
yep.
about her. I need you to have a
Yep.
conversation with her, because if we're going to do this, we need to do it. If we're not
Yeah.
going to do it, everybody can go back to their corners.
Yeah.
And so he
Exactly.
was asking them to figure out what was going to be par, like what's going to be the baseline of your relationship, and
Yeah.
how we're going to move forward. Are we going to move forward? And so as I'm listening to you and kind of restating and thinking through my feelings about it, I would say that Zoe is probably the character that I most could be like, okay, he is normal, and I wish him the best.
Yeah.
But I think she was, I think, and too, this is the other thing. She was a little bit of Zoe. She was a little bit of Jade. She was a little bit of Kennedy. She was a little bit of like all of these people that were like half her age and younger. And so
Yeah.
I'm
I
like,
could see that.
is this like just like being emotionally stunted, because that happens when you're abused? And or is this that this lady is legitimately crazy? Like, what
Well,
what are we dealing with
I
here?
definitely think, so one of the things that I liked, right, was that Lons was the one that was like, we need to go to therapy. Like,
Yeah.
we all need some productive strategies and
Right.
tools to work through this,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that was real too, right? Again, I'm sure that you've encountered them. I know I have people who clearly
Yeah.
need it, right? And who are educated, who are successful,
Absolutely.
who think they're self-aware,
Yes, ma'am.
who know that really traumatic things happen to them, but therapy does not cross their minds, right? And
Right.
she
Right.
clearly was one of those people, because it didn't sound like therapy had ever crossed her mind until
Mm-hmm.
Lon says, you know what, we all need to go to therapy, so that we can begin working through all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so while it is possible, and your point is well taken about, that emotional, um, the stunting of emotional maturity can happen when you've been abused. I don't disagree with that, and I suspect that that was definitely at play. Yet and
Mm-hmm.
still, I just kept saying, if there was no Zoe in the picture, if there was no child in the
Right.
picture,
Right. Right.
then
Right.
I'm more understanding, right? Because now we're just talking about two adults figuring
Yeah.
their shit out, right?
Right.
There's a child in the situation. I'm like, I need you to get something together,
Yeah.
because we can't all be flapping in the wind. And the youngest, right,
Right.
who had no ownership of this, right? All of this was imposed on him.
Mm-hmm.
He needs you to get yourself together. Not he's got to hold himself together and then also feel like he's
He
got
got to
to do
pick you
some
up too.
things to help pick you up as well. That should not be his burden. You've already burdened him enough, you
Right.
know.
But that I thought too, like, so when we talked about Trent and Jade, what we loved about them was that Kyrie was the focus in the beginning. And so here again, like, she's almost like the dirty mirror version of Jade. Like, her creeping into the
Ooh,
room is gross.
ooh, that's a good way of putting it.
Like,
That's a good way of putting it.
she is the anti-Jade. She is gross. And I am like the way that I'm trying to think, is there a Love Belvin heroine that I like love, 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 love? I don't think so. I think Jade is probably the closest. So me and Ezra go together. I think that's something that everybody understands.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But Um,
Winter and Lex are it for me.
I do I
They
do
are my top
enjoy
two.
Winter. I think it's probably a tie between Winter and Jade, with Lex a close second.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't even know why. I think there was. I think. Oh, I know why. Because I wanted Lex to make him. Because I'm petty. I wanted her to make him work harder. But I understand. So I wanted her to do. Anyway, we can talk about that another day. When we do Ezra, we'll talk about that. But to me, Nadira is the dirty mirror version of Jade. She is the anti Jade. The sun is
Mm,
the center of what brings them together. She is in the house with this man who is distant, who's doing her a solid simply because of her son, who's putting the son first, doesn't want to, because they even had the same conversation about telling Kai, or in this instance, telling Zoe, so that he doesn't
yep.
feel betrayed. But Nadira, it was just, she started off to me as like a Zoe or a Kennedy, and then but the dirty mirror version when she was 17, and then she turned into the dirty mirror version of Jade. Even Raina eventually comes into her own. Like, I just never feel like I saw Nadira, and maybe that's what it is. I feel like, and this is what you've been saying, but it's now kind of coming to me as I listen to you and think through what you're saying. She never stands up. She never comes to the party. She never shows up. She stays in this place of, I feel compelled to do this for my son, but then when she starts doing weird stuff in his bed, like now the motivations aren't clear. She's like territorial with his girlfriends. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, and Jade was too, right? When she was asking like, "Oh, where you going? You need me to
Yep.
clear out. You got a girl with you. I can close the house up," like trying to fish
Yeah.
and find out if he's dating. Same exact thing. And so it's kind of like, I will say of Love Belvin's characters but again, I haven't read Tori's story yet. The women, even though they come in like lambs, they eventually turn into lions. And then when they are lambs with their prospective mates, because she writes alphas only, when they are lambs, it is because they choose to be.
Mm,
And so Lex submits to Ezra by the end of the series because she chooses to. The very
hmm.
last scene, she's standing outside his room and she's like, "Can you hurry up?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the same thing with Jade. She says she stands up to Trent, which is something that you think you would never see her do, where she says, "I want to take care of you like nobody else has ever has."
Yeah.
And if that's a problem with you, for you, that's your problem. But it's what I intend to do. And it's the very thing that makes him feel safe enough to say, "Let's go to Mason Beach this weekend." I think that's the same thing, and get married. The same thing with Zoe, with like, "Nah, we got to break up. You clearly impregnated me on purpose, like a psycho." The same thing with Kennedy, where she endures his wrath. Once he finds out that she's been with his kids and he didn't know, and had a miscarriage, blah blah. So it's like we see these other women. Same thing with Raina, who eventually stands up. Like, Nadira never stood up, and I was just like, "Girl, where you at? Like, we are Black women. Are you crazy?"
Yeah. She had the one moment at the dinner with Trent, checking Trent on bringing up Tanisha. But again, it was just at that point I was kind of like, okay,
Yeah,
right.
I think
But
too much
I
had
was like,
happened by that point,
yeah,
and
yeah.
because I'm a Trent stan, it was like, "Girl, who you talking to?"
Well,
Like,
I thought she was absolutely right.
she was.
And let's talk about that for a moment,
Yeah.
because Trent surprised me a little in like the first conversation. I was with him and I
Hmm.
got it, and I thought it was important for him to give Lons the lay of the land from Trent,
Right.
from where Trent was sitting, right? He's like, bro, I understand they brought you in, right? And you trying to start a new chapter. I hear all that. But let me
Hmm.
tell you where I'm coming from,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Right.
And I thought that was, I'm like, yes, I agree, because you've been living with this. Lons has not. Lons is acknowledging that, but he's also coming in fresh faced and wanting to turn the page, and all that's fine, well and good, but for the folks that have been living in this cesspool, it's not that simple. But
Hmm.
when Trent kept
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
I was kind of like, Well, now this is interesting because for
Right.
as someone who, and we talked about this, right? As someone who has messed up several times,
Mm-hmm.
right? And needed and wanted and received grace,
Yep.
you being real
Yes.
self-righteous with
Yes.
someone who you acknowledge is not the actual target of your indignation, right?
Right.
It
Right.
is management, it is ownership, it is not lawns. So you
Right.
know you're shooting the messenger, but you're putting in bullet after bullet after bullet
Right.
after bullet,
Right.
all while saying, I know it's not you, but I'm mad at them. And you need to, and I'm not sure that they have listened to me in sending you. So I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to keep shooting you. And I just kind of thought to myself, really, Trent? Like again, I was with you after the first conversation, but you're really taking it too far. And when he got all, at the dinner, he was out of line, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
as Lex said, you know, Tanisha and Alston, I mean,
For the
please, right?
streets.
Okay, community genitals, okay, both of them. And I felt bad for Lons being collateral damage in some ongoing, Tanisha Alton foolishness, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
all that was. I was like, girl, I mean, you finally decide to cheat after his 5011th time of cheating, and like this is what we doing. And I really did legitimately feel bad for Lons because he had no idea who she was, and here he is
Mm-hmm.
signing this this great contract and getting this huge amazing opportunity, and yet this skeleton comes dancing out the closet and he's like, Lord, I didn't even know, like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea. So I did think it was, when Trent threw that in her face, threw that in Lonz's face, I was like, really? Especially when I think about how Tanisha behaved towards Jade when they
Right.
first met, right? It's not like
Right.
Tanisha was warm and fuzzy and welcoming and friendly. Like she stank.
Exactly.
She was straight
Exactly.
stank. And I never got the impression that they got to the point where they were besties, right?
Right.
The impression
Right.
was they probably tolerated each other's presence because of their mutual love for Stanton. That's it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know.
No, that's
So
exactly
I
right. I
really
think
thought
that's
Trent was out
right.
of line.
Yeah, and I also um felt like Trent would have been with the Kings long enough to have that conversation with Eli.
Yep, exactly.
And
Exactly.
and maybe
Yes.
he did, right? Maybe he did and we just didn't see it, but
Right.
it kind of felt like, boy, I just got here. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like,
Right.
I mean, we have all like come to a job that has a toxic environment, whether it's been toxic or there's been just a series of issues and morale is low. And whether you come in as a manager or as a staff person, consultant, whatever, and it's kind of like, and sometimes people do dump on you.
Right.
um, and so you're right. The first time I was kind of like, true, right? Let them know, listen, I got a family and I don't have just a family. I have a Jade. Like you need to
Right.
understand. Like she is not a trophy wife. She is not somebody that is, no, she's literally about me. Um, and so yeah, but by time number two, three, I was like, well, what you want him to do, boy? This has the season
Right.
started? Like,
Right.
where are we going with
Right.
this? So,
Yeah.
but and I think the other thing that helped me, that made it harder for me to connect, was that we didn't get a lot of the other characters, and when we did get them, they weren't happy.
Right.
So, like, we got Ezra, a little bit of glimpse of Ezra. We got a little bit of glimpse of Raji, and that's another reason why I love Raji, because I used to sing. So, like, I used to, like, we'll get into it when we talk about them, but like, literally, I am Ezra. I don't know how she wrote my life. I do not
Well,
know the
you're
grade.
not because, as you said, you're
I'm
not
not the
into
BDSM.
BDSM, and
No, but I
so
mean,
that's a
like,
critical part of Ezra's
of Ezra's
personality.
makeup.
So,
Absolutely. I have not traveled the world teaching people how to orgasm. I have not. But in terms of like church stuff, being a therapist, I got a whole other job that's not related to church or therapy, and that was real important to my grandmother, who said that one day you're going to want to get away from these people, and the only way you can get away from church people is to know how to do something else.
mm,
And so, like, literally, so my affinity for Ezra. really is like sad almost because I really love Ezra. But even with the stuff, and like I was talking to another author that was like, even with everything, and I'm like, even with everything, I still love him. But but so we see him, we get a glimpse of him, but we don't see him really shine. We get a glimpse of
Right.
Trent, but Trent is the ogre. We get a glimpse of Raji, but and we find out that they did adopt a baby, and maybe that came out in Muted Love, but they did adopt a
Yeah.
little boy Matthew. It did. Okay.
Well, you know what? It was more so, not so much in Muted Love, but in her post, in her IG
Okay.
post,
Okay.
spilling that hot fictional tea. There was a
Okay.
post that strongly hinted at, it was something like they were catching Winter and Raji coming from family counseling, and the
Okay.
post was like they're preparing for a family or something along those lines.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we see
yeah.
Raji, and I was so excited to see that they had adopted Matthew because I think he was the one that was serenading Winter. And Raj, but even Raji is not, we don't get a him and Winter moment, which I think Raji is happiest when Winter is in the room. And so
Mm,
it just we didn't get Cole, we didn't get Nate, we got a little bit of Sloan, but she was at work. Like we didn't get we got a little bit of Rhett, but he was at work. So I think that was the other thing that we got a little bit of Will, but she was at work. And so
hmm.
like every time we saw somebody that we knew, they weren't like happy. They were doing something else or they were upset. And so I think that's also it. Like it was just a weighty story that I there was not a lot of light for me to latch on to, I think.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair, right? And they win the Super Bowl, which is great, but it's not like
Yes.
we didn't get the
The Ramsey
um
moment at the end of the previous book and
yeah, yeah, or the build up, because we were focusing so
right, that
much
we don't see them
on,
play exactly. We don't see them play a game.
right, the
Yes.
the person, Lonz's personal life, obviously, since that was the focus of the book. And then to your point, when he's at work, it is this tumultuous
Mm,
rebuilding phase, right?
yeah.
Of and the anxiety of, will Trent be part of this? Won't he? And
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that other players, figuring out what their identity is, how do you get the best out of them, so on and so forth. Yeah, because I didn't necessarily feel that it was weighty. I think I just felt like I'm not, I don't like this um heroine.
Yeah.
And so it colored everything else for me. And I think, I thought to myself, I would be that family member that's holding the grudge, right? Years later, I'm side eyeing her at the family reunion, like, oh, right,
Here
and
she
then making
come.
a quick exit.
Hmm.
And I also thought, another thing about this that I think was real is, in a sense, that when someone has your number, right? When they just
Yeah.
have your number, right? They are the key to your lock. Um, Even with the ugly, the negative, the stuff that comes with them, they are the key to your lock. And so I almost felt like I was Lanz's, you know, like, not Monica, but another sister. And I'm just kind of like, she's the key to his lock, child. That's all I can say about that. Cause I think that's how I would characterize it, right? It would be
Actually, what I was
clear that
about to
I
ask
didn't
you,
agree.
do you think they belong together?
I think that belong is not the right word.
Okay.
Um, I think that, for better or worse, she connected with him clearly in a way that he had not connected with any other woman
Mm-hmm.
ever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That was clear.
Yeah,
They
because he done got the
connected
apartment for
at,
her and put down $1,500. Says little
well,
broke
yeah,
college
they
self.
connected
Yeah,
as, right, they connected as kids, and he did not connect with anyone else
after her.
like
Yeah,
that again,
yeah,
until it was her
yeah,
again, for
yeah.
better or worse, right? For better or worse. And I actually, I had watched, listened to, I should say, Love's, her pre-publication thoughts. And she had said, this book doesn't end with marriage, it doesn't end with a
Mm-hmm.
baby. She's like, but they are together.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was appropriate, because I wasn't ready. to see them
Mm,
rushing to the altar,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I thought that doing it with Alondria was a great way of, we're giving Lons the opportunity to experience a baby,
Mm-hmm.
but it's his grandchild, right?
Yeah,
And they're living with them. So he's getting that every day in home, what it feels
right.
like, what the experience might have been like
Had
if he
he,
had
yeah.
been there with Zoe from the very beginning. But it's coming through his grandchild. But I don't think I would have been happy. Like I'm resigned to the fact that they're going to be together. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why I say belong is not the right word. It's just
They
they have
together.
a connection that I don't necessarily like or agree with, but it is
Mm-hmm.
what it is.
Yeah,
And that's how I walked away from this story.
I agree. And I think one thing that I ended up kind of just thinking back on, I guess, as I read was how like Zoe and Lons really are the same person, just 21 years removed. And so it's almost like Zoe and Gina are what Nadira and Lons could have been had Nadira not had the father she had. So Gina's parents knew she was pregnant. They weren't happy about her moving to the East Coast, but they didn't force her into an abortion. They didn't beat the shit out of her that we saw. Her parents were kind of like, well, I mean, this ain't the right time, but it's happening. So, what we gonna do? Like that's kind of the sense that I got.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and then Zoe, being very much in love with her and talking to her when she finally figuring out a way for her to come out, right? Figuring out her housing and sorting out how she was going to get on the plane and very much taking responsibility and being present, which is what Lons
Mm-hmm.
in his heart feels that he would have done. And
Yep.
so he is like, I gotta find her a place. And this is what Zoe is doing because he wants to step up. And even when Lons, who eventually writes him a check, but I don't think at that time he had written him a check, he said, no, I need to what the money I need to earn
Yes.
and not
Yes.
inherit. And he says, to Gina, I'm okay with whatever you choose. I just don't want you to choose it based on the fact that I'm here and you're there.
Yes.
And so you
Yes.
you do get another mirroring where it's kind of like, what's her name? Nadira is the dirty mirror Jade. Zoe is the clean mirror Lons. And Zoe gets the opportunities that Lons never gotten, that we see Lons was clearly on that trajectory because he was like, your X number of days or weeks or whatever from your birthday, I got this place. I done put down
Yep.
1,500 of my little broke dollars, and we gonna figure
Yep.
out how to live a life together. And X number of moments after he makes this great declaration and sets this up, she's gone, and he goes up to her house, and the people is clearing it out. And
Yeah.
so it's another reason, another thing for. So I guess, well, let me say it like this: I hated them together. I hated them as a couple. I don't think they belong together. I want Nadira to go inpatient somewhere. I want her to go through therapy, and then I want her to come out on the other side a better person. And maybe when she come out, she can be with Lons, but probably not. She probably need to be with somebody else. But there was some intentional or unintentional crafting of these mirrors of previous characters and then even characters that are in the actual book. The redeeming value for me in this book, like, is Zoe and Gina and Alondria. That that Zoe is who Lons would have been, Gina is who Nadira would have been. And so it's almost like you see these couples on these two tracks. And one of them, the track is bumpy and full of shit and barriers. And then the other one, not necessarily smooth sailing, but they don't have baggage. So it's like it's one thing if you going through life and you hit these bumps in the road, but you're free and clear. You don't have a whole lot of other stuff weighing you down. So it's easier for you to climb over the barriers and get over and under. And so I kind of saw Zoe and Gina as they're going to hit barriers, but they don't have a lot of stuff weighing them down, where Lons and Nadira almost never had a chance. Like it was just never going to work. Like, and even once they were adults and could get together, it still just came together in the most crazy personist way.
Well,
Like,
let me, you've made me think of, because I remember Love saying, and I want to say it was like in one of the book groups during one of the book discussions or whatever, because Love makes the point that broken people love and deserve and need to be loved too, right? And so this notion of um I understand you want an idea to get therapy, get herself together, and then right. But
Hmm.
that's not how life plays out, right?
Right. It
That's
does
not
not
how
always
human
go that
beings
way.
often. That's the way they probably should, but that's not the
Hmm.
way they go down. And her point is well taken. Of I'm not going to leave those people for dead. I like doing stories about those kinds of people that have all
Hmm.
kind of mess because they do love, right? And
Right.
they do deserve love, and they deserve to be loved. But there's things that come with when you're broken and you're trying to love. That's why I said
Hmm.
the word belong, right? Because love is both, kind of going back to what I said about like being afraid and then being a coward, right? I agree that,
Hmm.
I'm one of those people who agrees that love is both an emotion and then it's a choice, right?
Yeah.
And so it was clear that these two people had a connection they had not shared with anyone else, right? It was
Hmm.
clear that they loved each other even back then, when neither one of them were mature enough emotionally to recognize it and or articulate it, right? Neither one of them could do that.
You know,
but the
okay.
but that love was there. That was love that they felt for one another, I believe. Just because you
So
can't, or just because you can't name it doesn't mean it's not love. It means,
I
I
completely
mean,
agree.
you know.
I think she loved him. I won't even say she didn't love him when they came back together. I could see her, and this don't make me like her no better. But it's like I kind of can see as you're talking. So I absolutely think she loved him when she was 17 and he was 21 or whatever. I think that the way that he made her feel, how free he made her feel, because we saw this
Hmm.
too with Kennedy having to sneak in a little bit and, be dishonest with her parents because of them being overbearing. And I'm trying to remember if Zoe's parents were overbearing too. I want to say yes. Yes, because when you were talking, it made me think about when Zoe was and her parents go in front of the lawyer and she's sobbing and she's like, he did love me or something. Somehow she's
But I don't think it was that Zoe's parents. Well, I didn't
were
perceive
they
them as
not overbearing? I
overbearing.
can't remember.
I
Maybe
didn't
they were
think it
just
was that.
disappointed.
It was the expectation of, she grew up in
Yeah.
the church, and getting pregnant
Okay, yeah. So
outside
she
of
was they were
wedlock
disappointed.
is,
They were
yeah,
disappointed.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I feel like with Nadira, I never saw her trying to love him. I saw Zoe fall in love with Alton. I saw Kennedy fall in
You
love with
mean
Isaac.
Stanton?
For Stenton, I saw
Hmm.
Kennedy fall in love with Isaac. I saw Jade fall in love with Trent. I saw Raina fall in love with Asmir. Some of these characters I don't love, but I understood the straight line. I think with Nadira, it never was clear to me that she still loved him. It looked like she wanted her son to meet her father. And when she saw him, maybe it brought up some old stuff, but like I couldn't figure out, I just never could parse her motivation. And even in the conversations that they had, it was very dry. And, up until she has the conversation when she finally comes clean. But I guess I never saw, yeah, I just never saw her fall in love with him again, or I never saw it spring up again. I saw her spending time with him. I saw her being sexually attracted to him, but I feel like I never saw her fall in love with him.
That's interesting because I always believed it was there, but she was a coward. She was a punk,
Yeah,
and
that
I
could be.
felt that her immaturity was showing through, because instead of,
Yeah.
number one, it was the look, 21 years have passed, and so, her trying to distinguish between the Lons that she knew versus the Lons
Hmm.
that she was now interacting with, who she acknowledged she did not know, and who had made it clear he didn't want to get to know her, and she's kind of
Yeah.
fumbling with her feelings about that. On the one hand, acknowledging that he absolutely has the supreme right to feel the way that he feels, and yet it's like she took accountability, but then was kind of like, but I'm going to do these things, like go and stay with him. And I'm just like, okay,
Hmm.
like you could have and should have just stayed in the hotel, right? You're gonna do, if you're gonna
Hmm.
continue to be the coward that you're behaving as. But again, I this goes back to one thing that I could not say was this was too fiction for fiction, right? Because like I
Yeah.
said, I recognize these things in people
And people,
in the
yeah, right,
flesh, right? And I was just like,
right.
yo, you just driving me crazy. But I had to acknowledge that was real. Even when people are completely, totally mishandling things and you're watching it and you're like, why are you doing it this way? You're just making a bad
Hmm.
situation worse. A bad situation that you and your father created. And I understand
Right.
you had to go along with for a certain period of time, but then you continued. And now you finally drop the
Hmm.
bomb, but it's like I had zero patience for that. I did believe
Yeah.
that she loved him, um, but it was also clear that she loved him in the way that she knew how, which candidly she didn't know how, right? So it was the
Right. That's
emotion.
true.
I felt like she
That's
felt
true.
the emotion, but she didn't have any um, real experience and or healthy context for the choice of love. So I felt like for
So,
her, it was she was experiencing the emotion at a certain point, and I was seeing that of, the attraction and
but we
the
don't get that
doing things.
that internal monologue. Yeah.
Right, we weren't getting that internal dialogues. Whereas I felt that that Lons was demonstrating love as a choice, right? Because he began
Yeah.
taking definitive
And as
steps,
an action.
demonstrating his love,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, love is an
Yeah.
action, right? Where he was like, I'm not just feeling this way about you, but I'm going to do things that speak
Yeah.
to the way I feel about you that are best for us.
It was also what happens when you are young and you fall for somebody or they make you feel a certain way and you never forget that feeling.
Right? Yep. Yep.
I think there was some of that too. That
Absolutely. The nostalgia of it, right? The nostalgia
absolutely.
of because look, I mean, both when he said that he recognized in therapy that her disappearing left an indelible impression on him, right?
Hmm.
But it was she overall, because his experience with her prior to her leaving left an indelible impression, right? Because
Right.
she was so different from what he had previously, clearly what he had previously dated, talked
Right.
to, slept with, right? She was the first
The whole
woman that
nine.
he,
Yeah.
performed oral sex on. And so there was a
Hmm.
certain virginity loss there.
Right.
She was the more aggressive personality and he was not.
Hmm.
Like I agreed when I think Lons is the one that says Zoe is me, looks like me, but with Nadira's personality. So I almost
Hmm.
felt like Zoe got the best of both of them,
Of both of them.
right?
Yeah.
Because I agree with you that we were seeing, through Zoe and Gina how Lons would have been, but Zoe was also just more vocal, more
Hmm.
expressive, more out
Hmm.
front with his feelings than Lons was, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think also, Zoe was kind of like immediately putting the stake in the ground and didn't seem to be struggling with his feelings about Gina. Although I give Lons credit for, he pulled the trigger and got the apartment. That was a huge,
Hmm.
gesture and act of love. And, I remember once we learned that Nadira was 17, I guess this even would have made sense if she was 19. But when she did he's telling her about getting the apartment and she makes the slick comment about, well, but I'm not your girlfriend, right?
Hmm.
And I was just kind of like, sis, you really showing that you're a kid, right? Like this man has gone and made this gesture to get you away from this father that you told him is an ogre, this horrible
Hmm.
person, and you throwing out to him, well, I'm not your girlfriend. Girl, if you don't sit down. But that's something that a 17-year-old would say,
Would
right?
say
A 17-year-old
absolutely.
who thinks they're smarter and slicker and more worldly and more experienced than they actually are, right?
Right.
Which also resonated, right? Because we've seen, I don't know
Hmm.
about you, but I've definitely seen, young girls who put their foot in their mouth because they thought they were being cute. And you're just like, all
Right.
you're showing is just how much of a little kid you really are.
Right. Right.
But yeah, like I really did just kind of walk away. And again, I just thought to myself, I haven't written my review yet on Amazon, but the fact that this book has taken so much mental and emotional energy, right? Like I thought about it after I finished it last night. I thought about it all today, and
Mm,
really, working through what I wanted to say and how I felt about Nadira and coming out on the I neither liked nor respected her, right? And yet I
mhm.
recognized her. And so it wasn't made up, right? Love didn't just kind of do
Right.
a caricature of like an awful person. Like there are Nadiras
Mhm.
walking around, right? And many of us have them in our lives, male and female. Um, and they
Mhm.
do damage, right? They do damage. They do
Right.
tremendous damage.
Right.
And yet, some of them end up with people, and you're just like, how, Sway? How is that still, you know, managing? But they are.
Mhm.
Which is again why I say, belong is not the word that I would use, and yet it appears to be working for them. And I think that's all you can say, right? And that's one of those like,
Yeah, you're
Lord,
right.
God knows best, it's not
I
my family,
guess.
not my burden. Exactly. I guess,
Right,
they're
right.
together, I
If
guess.
y'all have to do it, go ahead on, I guess.
Yes. And her sister, right? That whole, because we actually meet the sister. We don't realize the connection, but we meet the sister in Tori's book. The sister is, because of her,
Oh,
she runs in L's circle. And so there's another girls' night gathering where Janice is there spouting her foolishness. And when I read it in
interesting.
Love's Encroachment, I was like, why do they invite this child back? Like she is just walking toxicity. She needs to just be left home the next time. Elle gonna find herself disinvited to these girls' nights if she keep bringing Janice's, self-righteous know-it-all behind. But what was interesting was that
Hmm.
in comparison to Janice, right, you saw Nye looking self-aware, right? But she was already in therapy at that point, right? She's like, I'm in therapy and I'm
Okay.
healing and I'm learning some things about myself. And Janice is like, oh, therapy mumbo jumbo. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. And it's like, sis, there's so much wrong with you. There's so much wrong with her, right? But you just gonna continue to stay clueless, right?
But
Okay, fine.
go ahead,
Okay,
go
fine.
off, sis, go off. Good for you, good for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So let's think. We already know who needs to be stabbed, of course, Nadira.
Yes, her
Her
father,
father,
her sister,
her sister. Yes, we're praying for the
and
family.
and and I and I will also say this, that you know obviously the mother was abused, but again, I think something that was real. You see when the parents fail the children, right?
Right, right, right.
Because the mom, you know, and the kids. I mean, the brother running off at 18 and having nothing to do with any of them, right?
Literally
And
ever again.
literally showed up for the funeral and then pieced out as soon as
Yeah,
daddy was in the ground. And
he
again,
wasn't
that's
playing.
real too. That's real too,
Absolutely,
because I've seen that.
absolutely.
I've known that of family members who just,
Mm-hmm.
they felt like the best thing for them was to just have no contact ever again.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and you just the damage, right? Just the awful,
Yep.
horrible damage. I also thought the irony of the father being so loving and nurturing to Zoe, right? And
Yes. Yeah.
how Janice and Nye both say, he loved Zoe more than he loved us, which
Mm-hmm.
probably,
Was
it
true.
kind of ties into that, yeah, that joke of, grandparents being softer on the grandkids than they were on the
Right.
kids, and, more affectionate, more playful and
And it was,
whatnot.
and I think smartly, it was a sticking point for Lons,
Yes.
who said more
Yes.
than once, "You had that monster around my son."
Yes.
Um, and I did not disagree. I did not disagree. I
Yeah.
didn't disagree at all.
And I just kept going back to, you know, my beef with her of it going so long, right? Of
Hmm.
21 years going by. Because I just thought, time is, the one thing we cannot get back, right?
That's
It's
right.
gone. It's
Right.
gone. There's no going back to his birth, his first birthday, his first
Right.
steps, his first word. There's no going back to any of that. And every year, once she realized my father is full of it, right?
Hmm.
And particularly since Lons was not a bad guy. He wasn't abusive. It's not like she was like, well, my son is better off
Without
without his
him.
father in his life.
Yep.
That wasn't
Yep.
the
Yep.
case, right? And I just felt like every year, once she had that light bulb moment of, you know, my father was full of it and he manipulated me and I am an adult now and my
Yeah.
son needs to know his father. Every year after she had that light bulb moment, and it wasn't complete, we never knew when that happened, right? But we knew it happened before he was 21. I really held her even more accountable because it's like it's one thing when you're walking around and you don't have that moment, right? But when you have that light bulb moment and you continue to behave as if you didn't, shame on you. Shame
Yeah.
on you,
Well, and the point that
you know?
everybody kept making was that he looked just like him. Like,
Yeah,
look just like him, act just like him, is just like him. And yet and still, and I think that is the thing that most jarred and hurt and even disappointed Lons is I don't know how y'all did it, but y'all made me.
yeah,
And so I am confronted at 41, 42 with a carbon copy clone of myself that I
yeah,
had nothing to do with. And
yeah,
so now this grown man who stands at my height with my face and my smile, and I'm having to get to know him under the worst circumstances at the most trying time in my life. Um, and thanks, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Like you did this. Like and
right,
no, she didn't know he had just been named head coach, or maybe she did, you know what I mean? Because then she said I was kind of watching you over the years, and so
right, right.
it was just kind of like you really need to go to the doctor.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It was for all of her protestations that life revolved around and it was all about her son. I
it did not
felt her
always seem like
actions,
it
no,
felt disingenuous. Yeah.
her actions were very much about her and her feelings and her baggage and so on and so forth. And I just,
Hmm.
yeah, that's why I said I didn't like her and I didn't respect her. And, again, I think this is real, right? Because we've all encountered people who we may not have liked them,
Yeah.
but we respected them,
Hmm.
right? And you're able to make that distinction. I think when you become an adult and you've done a little bit of living, you understand the importance, right? You've seen in like the mob movies and whatnot, and they ask the question, is it better to be feared or loved or respected, or feared or respected, right? Or whatever the case may be. And there are different answers on that, but there is the difference, right?
Hmm.
And you see the difference because we've all encountered people who they may not be our cup of tea, but we at least respect them. And I think when you respect someone, there are lines you won't cross. That even when you like someone, if you
Right.
don't respect them, you will cross certain lines because the
Right.
respect is not there,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
I just felt like she was, and I think this is the first LB heroine that I haven't liked all of them, but she was the
Hmm.
first one that I walked away and I was like, I don't even respect you as a woman, like as an adult. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I needed you to find your ovaries, right? Like, I'm not going to be gender biased, be like, find your balls. No, find your ovaries, right? Find your tits, whatever, and
Hmm.
like woman up because I
Yeah.
can't deal with this. Oh, I'm a coward. I'm a coward. All right, then stop being a coward. I'm not saying you have to be the bravest person in the world, but I'm tired of hearing you acknowledge to yourself that you're a coward while you continue to sit in that. You
Right.
know,
Right.
like there ain't real deal things that need to be dealt with that you helped create.
Right.
I
Right.
just never got past that, because um again, it's to be afraid is to be human, but being a
Yeah.
coward is a choice.
Yeah. That's
That is
something altogether
absolutely a
different.
choice, you know. And I can't respect you if you're going to choose to be a coward. So,
Boo
boo.
is right.
Lons
Boo.
deserves better.
I don't even know if I'm all the way team lines because I want him to go to the doctor too. Because I'm like, why are you even bothering with her? But
He
okay,
isn't the doctor.
good. Stay there, and disinvite her. Um, okay, let's see. We've done. I think we've hit everything. We did like, we did surprise, we did stab. We even talked a little bit about questions that we might still have.
Yeah, my
Um,
other question would be, I would love to see. I know we won't get it, but I'd love to see how Zoe, because that was a huge, right? I mean, you meet your father, you find out about your father, and oh, by the way, your girlfriend is several months pregnant, right? And then
right.
she has the baby, and you're trying to, pursue possibly a football career, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot, right? And as self possessed and easygoing as Zoe was, it was a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hope that he continues to be okay. I want him to be okay. I hope that he, because it wasn't clear if he took them up on the offer of therapy. He was kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Right.
Um, but I wanted that for him because I was just like, oh, baby, like you just had a lot dropped on your plate. Some of it you
Mm-hmm.
created yourself, but this bombshell you did not, right?
Yeah.
And it was all happening at the same time.
Yep. I would agree.
I'd also be curious to see, the Alton Tanisha conversation
Yes.
after
Yes.
her stuff went public because we know, right? We know men can't handle getting a taste of their own medicine. So that was
At
probably
all.
a very entertaining, how does it feel now? And him,
Right.
going crazy, especially when you think of the after the wedding, right? Oh, I love this woman. This woman is, been amazing and blah, blah, blah. And she finally, they get married and she gives him a taste of his own medicine.
Good.
Um,
Choke.
yeah, exactly. That probably would have been just that is toxicity personified,
For
right? It's like
sure.
look it up in the dictionary and you see a photo of that couple. So
You know what I will say too, though, is that, and I don't know if they're going to do any more after this year, um, or if these two are the last installs, because I know they took a break last year, installments,
yeah.
and I know they took a break last year, and I'm not sure what the plan is, but this also felt like a reset, like
Mhm.
almost like
Mhm.
the first six books were like the freshman class,
Yeah.
because everybody was very young. So if Trent was 26 in the very first book, it's been 5 years. He's 31 now.
Yep.
He's, and as he can go, he has a long way to go as a franchise quarterback. But also he could choose not to have a long way to go.
Right. Right.
And has made enough potentially and enough investments and enough relationships to not need to work anymore and to be looking at quote unquote retirement in the NFL at 31, maybe
Mhm.
deciding out, he got, so he has two rings now, right? And maybe looking to other things the same way Jordan did. And then I would even say maybe Rut is the beginning of Rut and Parker, and then Sloan and Nate were kind of the beginning of the new class, the new school. What was it? Saved by the Bell, the new school, the new class,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But maybe that's what it is too. I think this is the darkest of the seven that we've seen so far, and I don't mean dark in like a um Ezra and Lex dark, like in terms of like some of what she experienced before meeting him and how like the BDSM kind of took her back to those places. And I don't
Mhm.
mean that, but I mean like it had the least happiness
Right.
um
Yeah,
of
I
the
would agree with
seven.
that. Yeah.
And so I'm wondering like if this is either a reset for the series, or are we looking at the new school, or like, you know what I mean, does it have some non-literary meaning that like, or like a meaning that's outside of the book but that has to do with the series itself. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just wonder because it definitely had a different feel. And then even reading, I haven't read any summaries, not summaries, samples of the new one by Christina C. Jones. Loves, I
Uh-huh.
forgot the name of it now. But
Offensive
let me get on the
formations.
internet. That's it. I'm about to say let me get on the internet so I can say the name. Offensive
Yeah.
formations. I haven't read any of those, but the I did see on Instagram she posted like a little piece of their conversation.
Yep.
Um and it was them like begrudgingly admitting that they were friends.
Yes.
And she and
Yes.
her caption was if you knew them, you would know that this is quite an accomplishment. And that little piece of stale conversation, which was cloaked in "I hate you," or you know what I mean, "I hate you" being the undercurrent, but let me begrudgingly admit that I know you. I was like, Jesus, if this is an accomplishment, these people.
Well, so now remember, right? Because we get the why of that in Love's Encroachment when he's having that conversation with the player Ambrose about the tennis player who posted, I guess a video was posted of her twerking, and Ambrose, I'm blanking on his first name, but Ambrose is his last name. He's on a podcast with two other players, and they made comments about this play about Tegan.
That's right.
Yes. And even though Ambrose didn't say anything, he was part of the conversation. And Tegan posts something basically eviscerating him. And Lons is like, bruh, like, why would you even go there? Right? Like, why would you even, if you
Hmm.
don't, and Lons says, he's like, look, I've got my own situation going on. He's like, I don't, and he's like, and I feel bad about that because when I'm discussed in the public, I don't want them talking about anything but my professional accomplishments, right? And I found myself in a situation because of my sloppiness and my actions where they're talking about something that has nothing to do with my professional accomplishments and everything to do with my personal life. He was like, you don't want
That's right.
them discussing you outside of what you do on the field. So don't even find yourself in a, so it's clear, that Ambrose was the one that she came for. And I will obviously get
Yes.
more, in on June 4th when
In
the
the
book
book. Yeah,
comes
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see
So
how they live their lives too, because they were unhappy with each other. And
yeah, and you know what? To your point about the characters that we knew, we're seeing them at work, and we're not necessarily getting that frivolity. It feels very serious. They're rebuilding. Their
hmm.
trust has been damaged for the team, and so on and so forth. It'll be interesting to see because right, Ambrose is a player, and so he's going to have a completely
Hmm.
different expected
Of that year.
perspective. Yep, and
Yep.
experience of that year from Lons. So query whether we will see some more frivolity, right, from the player perspective
Hmm.
as they are adjusting to this new regime, but also having moments of cracking jokes and, you know, um,
Yeah.
one tiny thing that surprised me, and it was kind of like thrown in as an aside when Trent is talking to Lons, and he's like, "Look, I have to be a leader. I'm going to funerals of people that I didn't know, but they were important to teammates, and so I, went and I showed support." He was
Hmm.
like, "Being a leader is me quietly but viciously whipping Terrence Grant's ass for approaching my pregnant wife." And I'm just like, Terrence Grant is still being messy, huh? Just
Terrence
because
Grant
it
cannot
doesn't
get
get
right.
any but it doesn't get any messier than approaching your quarterback's pregnant wife.
Right.
Like,
Like he
bro, what's
cannot
wrong
get
with you?
right.
What's wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with you?
He can't get right. And then
Seriously.
he stayed in Parker's house after the little repast.
Yes,
Um
like, yeah, he
that
just,
she
but
didn't
I
even
was
know
just
he was
like,
there.
it was just like, I was like, really, bro? Like, really? Like, your quarterback's
Yeah.
wife and she's pregnant? Like, what is wrong with
He
you?
can't.
Get yourself
I
together.
don't he It's not gonna work out. It's not gonna work out for Terrence Grant. I can tell you
There's no hope for him.
that.
Yeah, there's no, throw the
No.
whole man away. Throw the whole man away. There is no hope for him.
There's no hope for Terrence Grant. There's no hope
Yep.
for him whatsoever. Yes, he can't. He can't. He's not gonna make it.
No, throw the whole man
I'm not
away.
praying for him. I don't wish him the best, but it's clear.
Exactly. Exactly. Bye.
Good
Bye.
and bad. Okay.
Bye.
Any last words? Any last words? Final thoughts?
No, I think again it just kind of goes back to the ability to distinguish, right? Because I think when I was a younger reader, if I had such a strong reaction to a character, I would have expanded that to say, I don't like that writer, right? Or I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
writer did
Mm-hmm.
a good job. And I think as a more mature reader, being able to distinguish and say, I really didn't like this character. Um, but but distinguishing and saying, but you know what, the fact that I had such a reaction to this story does say something about this writer's writing ability.
Mm,
Because I think we both read books where you're kind of like, hey, eh, eh, hmm,
yeah. And
right,
I will be
and you're
honest, like,
both reacting to the story and you're reacting to the storyteller. You're just like,
yeah, I'm definitely reacting to the story.
yeah,
Um, where it's just kind of like I tried, but these people ain't for me, and they
yeah,
don't have to be for
yeah,
me.
yeah.
I remember one time I saw I have seen reviews differently since writing, and a author who I very much respect said to me, the reviews have nothing to do with what you write. Um,
Yes,
it is
fair,
about
fair.
those, absolutely. She said it's about those people projecting themselves onto your work. And that was never more true for me than when a reader messaged me that she did not like, she either put it in a review or she messaged me that she did not like Back to Us because her marriage didn't come back together. And I
Mm,
said, okay, like,
mm.
that's fair.
It triggered
That's
her. It
fair.
triggered her.
Yeah, but I am
Mm,
bound by the rules of romance. So we either need happily ever after or happily for now. Like that just has to be, at least for me, not for everybody, but for me. I don't think
yeah.
I could ever write a romance where they go their separate ways. I just can't do it because that's not why I read romance. I read romance for people to be together. So I feel like you do get to a point where you can just separate the writer from the reader and not whole cloth be like, oh, this person is trash just because the one story didn't hit you the right way because we all have our preferences.
Yep.
um
Yep.
so
Yep.
yeah, I think like, and I do, like, I reread certain things simply when I want to feel a certain way. That don't have
Yes,
nothing to do with
agree
who
with
wrote
that as
it.
well.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
And can I just, and I was just going to say, I would add on to what that read. I think that was well said. I would also say it has nothing to do with how people interpret it, right? Because they
Yeah.
are interpreting and filtering the story
Yep.
through their own life experience, right? So it's,
Exactly.
they are processing it through a lens that is colored by experiences that
Yes.
are uniquely their own, right? And
Hmm.
so that has nothing to do with you either, right? You've written
Yep.
a story, or a writer has given us a story, and then when we each read it,
Yep.
it is coming through Adrian's lens, it's coming through your lens, it's coming through, right? And
Hmm.
so um you have no control over that. I think that's the beauty of it, but also I guess a good way to think about it so that you don't take it personal. Because
Hmm.
to your point, that reader was filtering back to us through the lens of her experience, which was, that is not how it played out for her marriage, right? That's real, but
Hmm.
that has nothing to do with your story. It's just, she happened to read a story, and it didn't reflect the outcome that she experienced in her own relationship, which,
Right. Or
that's
even
how it
how
goes
we met.
sometimes.
Yeah, like even how we met. You wrote a review for Ivy and Greg. I still can't remember the name of that damn book. All of Me. All of Me. I remember now because I love Greg. Greg is actually probably, I don't want to say he's my favorite character I've ever written, but I very much love Greg. But you said something that I knew was true because I was struggling with it as I wrote it, but I was on a deadline. So I was like, we just got to work this out. And it was my first time trying to plant and pay off. And I'm
Mm,
still not good at it, but I was trying to plant that she was having her wild child days and Q was having his wild child days. Both of their parents are moneyed and powerful and are hoping that
mm-hmm,
their children will exhaust themselves and be together and
mm-hmm.
further the legacy. But I did not have enough time to put it together because I was writing for MT Dixon and she'd be serious about her deadlines. And
Got
so
it.
so
Got it.
I was still learning how to do that and I was under deadline. But you were the only person that said that. And when I read it, I was like, she need to be a beta because that's exactly what I was struggling with. And so I harassed you on two different internet platforms. Um,
It wasn't harassed. You approached, and I gladly accepted.
and was like, I need you to read all my stuff before I put it out because you understand the world. But so, but like
Except for when I'm being
even
the
that,
worst person ever.
yes, because you was very much wrong about Cole and Jordan, and
Exactly.
that's still true. And I do wish that you were a better person, but it's nothing I can do
I,
about that at this point. So we just have to proceed. But
I said I hold grudges, right? You see, I'm still holding on to that. A week later, I'm still holding on.
look at this foolishness, look at this foolishness.
I
Anyway,
can't
long
let
story
go.
short, I say all that to say that even reading your review, I could have very much taken it personally, or I could have used it to my advantage, which I have done, and now we're on a podcast together.
And I, one thing that I'm always mindful of is this is it's a gift, right? Those of you who have this ability to tell these stories, right, where we can see it is a beautiful gift to have, and I'm grateful for all of you that share it. And I think about the courage it takes to put your work out there, right? Knowing that everyone is not going to be constructive. And Love always
Yeah.
says, she says, look, be honest, but please be kind, right? There's no need to be nasty about it. You can have
Hmm.
your reactions and be truthful without being nasty, but that
Yeah.
takes a courage, right, to put it out there. So I'm always mindful of giving credit where credit is due. Because if I've read it and enjoyed it, it's like that, then it's been an escape. And again, even the
Yeah.
characters that you don't like, there is something to be said for a character being formed in such a way that you're just like, oh, there's something to be said about that. The same way the That's right. The same way the characters that you absolutely love and adore, and you're like, oh, I just want to wrap you up and I make love to
Hmm.
you and kiss you and
Hmm.
hold you. The other side of that coin, that takes talent too. Because I think,
Yeah.
there are some characters that they don't provoke any kind of reaction from you, right? They're just not formed
Hmm.
enough for you to have a reaction at all. Whether that
That's true.
was the author's intention is a different story. So I think the ability to form a character in such a way that it provokes such strong reactions, there's a lot to be said for that. And we're all not writers, clearly. So I enjoy the gifts. I enjoy your gift. I enjoy CCJ, LB, Ashley Nicole. There's too many to name. I'm making my
Yes.
way through Sabrina Scales' catalog now, and I'm just like, damn, like, God, she's amazing. Like, whew, you know, come with it.
I have not read anything. I'm currently on a Ashley Nicole binge. So we will have to come together after this, and we're gonna have to come up with a schedule. So I think after we do what's the name of this? After we do Connecticut Kings, we're gonna take a break and then decide who's gonna be next. Are we gonna do Ezra and
Okay.
Raji? Are we gonna switch to another author? I'm about to read Ashley Nicole's. Um, what am I about to read? I think it's The Closer I. Wait a minute.
Ooh, okay. Closer I get to you.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. The Closer I get to you, I'm gonna reread that.
Okay. Get ready.
And
That
then,
is heavy.
oh
It's
Lord,
heavy.
oh
It's the
Jesus.
heaviest. I mean, I think she acknowledges that's probably the heaviest
Yeah, I just read her
work
like
that
little
she's
her
done.
author's note. Yeah,
It's heavy, but it's yeah, it's well done, but it's heavy. And so there are parallels with Raj. Um,
okay,
I'll just say that, and to kind
okay,
of prepare yourself. But Ashley Nicole, she is such a phenomenal writer that you are absolutely going to enjoy the story. But just it's heavy, and I
yeah,
think
okay.
she handled it masterfully. Um, in light of how heavy it is. Because
Mm,
there are still, some great chuckle moments. The female
mm-hmm,
heroine is hilarious, and I think that she is the beam of light, which is much needed
mm,
because Lou, the hero, is. Ooh, he starts off and you don't know why, right? We don't know why. I think similar to Raj, right? We didn't know why he was
right,
such an
yeah,
ass, and then you learn why, and you're kind of like, okay.
gotcha.
But I'm blanking on the heroine's name, but she is just such a beam of light that she would brighten any room, but this is a particularly dark room, and she
Okay,
just bursts
she
through.
lights it up. Okay.
Yeah, she really does. She really does.
Got it. All right. Well, I think this is it.